Bekos has found his way to South Africa. And while here, we wanted an outlook on how recent power changes in government are affecting South Africans. Now, let's meet Mphahlela. He's a young South African entrepreneur who goes by the name of Mr. Decorum. He shares his perspectives on the post-apartheid era, the mindset of the youth, government corruption, and citizens of South Africa utilizing their newly found voice.
How's it? My name is Mphahlela Mokgatle. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm born and bred in the hood of Soweto. We're in Soweto right now, one of my aunt's houses. And I must say, you know, we're dealing with a situation where apartheid is over. And I was born in 1990 when, you know, Nelson Mandela was released from prison. But it's the hangover stage, you know, where we're now actually transitioning. And I think our democracy is very young. It's still a democracy, it's still learning what's happening, you know, still understanding how to run parliament, how do you run a state, how do you run a country. So from my perspective, you know, I wasn't born in apartheid, but, you know, my parents were definitely in it. You know, my mom was part of that, was part of the struggle and running around in the streets, you know, being shot at. So they've been part of that. And when you talk about a hangover, you're talking about something that's actually a migraine, you know, and as a generation that's learning from a generation who was part of it, it's quite tough. You know, it's quite tough economically, it's quite tough going forward and actually saying, how do we break the circle? You know, how do we actually say we're building generational wealth? It's a very difficult transition, but at the same time, it's what you do about it. You know, as young South Africans, young black South Africans, we're actually getting out there and we're saying, we are good and we can actually do certain things, you know, and that's what's happening in South Africa. I mean, right now we're sitting in Soweto. You know, back in the day, we wouldn't just sit in the rows and just sit in the streets just like this. You know, we're actually building an economy. There's an African market that's actually happening at the moment, and we want to build it, you know, we want to build an international market. And I think it's actually quite nice what's actually happening, but we need to work harder as Africans to get somewhere.
I've noticed in my time here that people are very much interested in what's happening with government policies. It seems a large portion of those inquiring minds are entrepreneurs looking to build businesses. Is more entrepreneurship what South Africa needs?
Look, I mean, it's a very difficult situation because everyone still goes to school. You know, I mean, bear in mind, school is good because it builds certain developments, but school also incorporates a worker. It builds a worker instead of an entrepreneur. Our schools are not equipped to build entrepreneurs. You know, for example, if you don't know how to build an income statement or a balance sheet, how are you going to know your numbers as an entrepreneur? So it's very difficult. Who's teaching that? Who's giving us that transition to say, you know, you start from 1 and you go to B. School only teaches you 1, 2, 3, 4, follow the road, but doesn't teach you how to actually, you know, build yourself as an entrepreneur. So there's a lot of entrepreneurs popping up, but entrepreneurs are not learning the skills to become an entrepreneur. You know, they're not learning the actual ability to become an entrepreneur. I mean, being an entrepreneur is tough. I mean, going to school, people complain that you have to be school the whole day, you're at school the whole day, you're studying. But being an entrepreneur, it's probably 24/7. It doesn't stop. So it's just as difficult. And the barriers to entry into market are even more difficult. I think it's hunger. You know, if you're hungry, you start thinking that, how do I get out of this hunger? But how do I build at the same time? You know, and a lot of us as young people, we're not hungry enough. You know, if you're hungry and if you look at a lion, I like using a lion and a zebra analysis. A lion wakes up and says, I'm going to hunt. It's the morning, it's time to hunt. And a zebra says, oh, well, I need to run away from the lion. So you pick what you are in life. Either you wake up and you're going to run around the whole day running from lions, or you're going to be a lion and say, I'm going for it. I'm going to seek the knowledge. I'm going to speak to people over this, you know, abroad. I'm going to talk to people in Los Angeles, people from wherever, and get knowledge. It's that hunger for knowledge and saying, you know, I'm a sponge. I came to earth. I'm here to impact. I learn from people, and from those learnings and from those skills, I can impart knowledge. You know, and I think as young people, the biggest mistake as millennials we make is that we don't learn from the older generations. Those people are wise. You know, a 90-year-old, 80-year-old has got years, and they extract that, learn that knowledge, and use technology to go forward. And that's my philosophy. I mean, looking at the government transition, I mean, it's changed. But what I've learned is that the fiscal hasn't changed. You know, when I talk about fiscal, I'm talking about the economic side of things. You know, a lot of black people are waiting for example, a grant, or they're waiting for housing, and let's be honest, guys, government can't do everything for us. You know, we also need to upskill ourselves and actually get to a point where we're actually fighting and getting into transitioning. It's happened. I mean, the past administration, which was Jacob Zuma, is not the same as with Cyril. He's more of an economist. He thinks more economically, and he's looking for the viable options. So I think our economy is turning. I must say there is a big turn in our economy. We have our elections next year in 2019, so we're going to now vote into parliament. Probably the ANC will probably win it. We're not sure. We'll see what happens. But then we'll see the shake-ups. You know, there was a lot of corruptions. We've got a lot of inquiries happening. So there's a lot of change that's currently happening in our parliament. But I think let's give it 10 years and then we can talk about our economic side. Because at the moment, we're not sure where our economy is standing. I mean, the rand dollar at a point was 16, 17, which was quite high. It's brought it down with the Cyril Ramaphosa administration. So I think let's give it time. You know, as I said, we're still a young democracy, but I don't think we're there yet. You know, we still have to see, we want to see those changes. He also doesn't want to make lots of changes within parliament because, you know, he's still a president for now. He might not be voted in next year, you know, if ANC doesn't win. So he's playing it very steady. I think let's give it on look of the next 10 years if ANC wins. Let's see what happens to parliament. Let's see what happens to dynamics.
After hearing his thoughts on the government as it exists in its current state, I had to ask his thoughts on government corruption. The political climate in South Africa changed rather abruptly, and some would say it's for the better, whereas some would prefer the previous iteration. My question would be, is corruption inevitable due to human nature, or is it simply a byproduct of the newness of this particular system of democracy?
Look, I think, honestly speaking, ethics is ethics. I'm a man of principle, and I think, you know, being corrupt is not something you learn on the streets. It speaks to your principles as a person, you know, and because of that, I mean, if you're already in power in terms of parliament and you're eating from the hands that you're supposed to be feeding, it says a lot about you. So the corruption is rooted, you know, I mean, it's a matter of people giving, for example, tenders to friends. It's a matter of people saying, okay, well, you know, your son has got a bursary and you go to pilot school when that million could have built 15,000 houses. You know, it's about what prioritizes. People are looking out for their own pockets, not saying, as a nation, how do we build? So there's a lot of deep-rooted corruption, and from my perspective, it would come directly from people just being greedy. You know, power corrupts, but absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that's what's currently happening. You know, there's a greed that's currently happening, but we're not looking at it from a perspective of saying, we are all hungry as a nation. How do we feed the nation? You know, if I was in parliament, my first thing is, how do we make sure that everyone's got a shelter? How do we make sure that everyone eats? How do we make sure that everyone's got basic education? How do we get people to be upskilled? Whereas I just want to upskill my own family. And I think that there's a part of that which is wrong. And you're right, you know, it might come from the past where people say, I've been starving, now it's my time to eat. So it's a double-edged sword. They're saying, now it's my time to eat, but you're just eating with 5 people. Money and a lot of things that could have actually been shared for the nation and build us as a nation.